What actually happens when you start suppressing this libido that wants to come through your life and be directed into this world through your ideas, through your hard work? Whenever all that energy wants to flow into this world and it doesn't have an exit, it does not disappear. It just finds a new door. Hey, what's up? Welcome to the show. Today I got a good one for you, or at least I believe it's a good one for you. And I'm using a term that people feel uncomfortable with, but this is how I've seen it show up in people's life. So my current profession right now is helping people get what they want in life through coaching. And that involves transformation. But even if I weren't doing that, I would still see the same thing show up in all the people that I've worked with in my other business, where I was helping companies get more leads and grow their revenue through getting new clients. And this is how it shows up. It shows up in a way that they can't speak up for themselves when they would have a difficult client or have a difficult boss or have a difficult situation. They don't speak up for themselves. They don't set prices that reflect their worth, or they don't negotiate their salary or have conversations with executives in the company that reflect their worth. They don't push back when a friend, a spouse, a partner, whoever is giving them their plans and their goals. And they don't push back because they're really afraid of what that could mean for them. So on the outside, maybe they look very confident and composed, but on the inside, they're really screaming and they wish that they could say something, but saying something feels like a threat. That's what this episode's about. We're going to talk about the energy that wants to move through your life and what happens when you shut that down. And I'm calling that energy libido. So this episode is about a libido for your life. Now, I do want to set one thing in motion here. Is libido is a term that has a lot of different connotations to it, but the easiest way that I think of it is its Latin origins, which it really just meant a desire. So it's a longing, it's a wanting, it's something that's pulling you towards something. And in order to get that thing that you're being pulled towards, you need energy for that. And you need to be freed to pursue those things. And that's where it gets difficult, because like the example that I gave you earlier, people who feel like they can't talk back to people or they can't fight for what's important for them, they're actually not free. And it's very similar to the word liberate. Libido, liberate. Liberate is a slightly different root word for it, but it's the same understanding is that, or very similar understanding is that I'm free to move towards something that I want. So one way to think about a libido for life is libido equals the desire. It's the desire. It's the thing. It's the idea that pops into your mind. It's the thing that starts with a spark. And if you've ever seen one of those videos of when an egg is actually implanted with sperm, what happens is that they did this in mice. They did a study, and I think they added some additional zinc for it. But it's a really cool thing to watch on YouTube, because as soon as the sperm goes into the egg, there's like a zinc spark. So libido is this energy that comes into our life, and it gives us a different spark to potentially learn a new skill, explore a city. It's that urge that we get when something doesn't exist and we see it and we want to create it. So libido is the desire with the energy to pursue. It's the desire and the energy to change not only ourselves, but to change how we show up in a situation. And even if we kind of leave this psychological, theoretical space for a moment, and we just look at it, how this shows up, how energy shows up in the regular world, it's actually so much in our face that it's hard to see it. And I remember the first time my wife, she's studying to be a nurse practitioner, but I remember the first time she was telling me about, on the heart monitor, when you see it beeping, it's really just electrical wiring. It's electric. I was like, what? She's like, yeah, that's just electrical signals that we're measuring, the heart impulses. And it really blew my mind, the fact that our heart is sending out electrical signals. That's like the craziest thing, is that there's just energy and you can read it. And that's what keeps us alive. There's also ways that we look at it in our regular world, and I'm being very practical here so that you see that it's so common and it runs everything. Without energy, we really wouldn't have this podcast. You wouldn't have the car. You wouldn't be able to move. The idea of a calorie, we're eating, I can't remember the term, but a calorie is really just energy, which is pretty crazy when you think about it. I think a way that you measure energy, or it's like heat that's being given off. So whenever you think of, I need to eat so many calories a day, or I need to eat fewer than this many calories a day so that I lose weight. So everything that we do is about energy. And it's so crazy that we really don't think about it. It's even more important that I say it this way, because if I'm using the word libido, it really kind of sticks it in your mind that you are run off of energy, the food you eat, the ideas you get, and actually pursuing those things. If you were not to have any libido, any life force, you would not be here. So keeping in mind that everything runs off energy, that our ideas do somehow. I have no clue how it works, but it's a very interesting thing. And I think about this quote from T.D. Jakes. He says, "God made trees, not chairs." What's interesting about that quote from T.D. Jakes is that what it really highlights is that there's potential inside the tree. Of course, it could be a chair. It could be a handle for an axe. It could be many different things, but there's potential inside the tree. And that potential is something that a person sees. And if they want it and have the will and energy to bring it into the world, they can actually make a chair. And our libido gives us these ideas, it gives us these desires, and it also gives us the energy to pursue the things that are important to us, whether it's writing a book, creating a business, setting boundaries for yourself, creating music, having a meaningful conversation with a stranger that just kind of gets your attention and you go up to that person. None of these things that we do, none of the things that we say exist without the desire that precedes it. So here's the main point before we get into just some really clear ways in understanding how this can show up in your life is having a libido for life means recognizing there's desires you have and you are given energy to pursue them. I'll say it one more time. Having a libido for life means recognizing the desires you have, taking time, taking account. What are the desires you have? And then also realizing you have the energy to pursue them. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to pursue everything, but that's where you really have to take account of who you are and what's important for you and what you really have energy for, because that changes as you get older. As you get older, you're not going to be able to do everything. You have to be even better at being able to spot the things that are important for you. So here's a question. What are you recognizing? What will you pursue? If you're somewhere that you can write it down and come to it later at nighttime, or maybe you pause the podcast and think about it now, what are you recognizing about your life? What are the things that are popping up for you that consistently pop up for you? And what will you pursue? For some of the things you do, it's going to take years. And that creates a lot of friction. It creates a lot of trouble. And if you still keep having this energy coming into your life, coming into your ideas, this libido is pushing you forward, it's directed energy, and you feel like you can't achieve what you want because of all the friction, what you start to do is suppress. You start pushing that energy down. So before I get into when you suppress that energy and you push it down, I want to give you some tools as far as thinking through archetypes, because when you can think through archetypes, it makes a lot of this easier. Now, this idea of archetypes, there's unlimited archetypes and everyone uses archetypes. There's archetypes for what type of business owner you are. There's archetypes for what type of marketing you do. There's archetypes for everything, and there's an unlimited amount. But I'm just going to talk about one so that I can make this clear. And if you want to find other information or other research, you can check out a lady named Carol S. Pearson. She's someone that writes about it, and she primarily talks about 12 that are helpful for development. I'm just going to talk about one, and the one that I'm going to focus on is really the warrior. And I think getting an idea of how one of these works helps you understand how all 12 that she talks about work. The warrior is the part of you that knows what it stands for, and it refuses to betray that. So it knows what it stands for, and it refuses to betray that. You may feel bad when you betray it. You're like, I know what I want. I know what I should do in this situation, but I don't have the courage to do it. And the warrior also helps you set boundaries, not out of anger, but out of self-respect. It speaks up in meetings not to dominate others, not to be heard, but really just to say what's true. And that's a hard thing to do, to say what's true. It names the price when you're talking to clients without apologizing because it knows what it's worth. Maybe an easy way to think about it is the warrior is the energy of I will defend what matters to me. And if you haven't had the ability to do that when it comes to, and I'm just going to talk about business owners right now because that's primarily who I work with. When it comes to people pleasing, which I see often, the project expands. So they've been hired, a business owner has been hired to do one thing. And in the process of doing that one thing, the client says something like, oh, could we do this as well? And we call that scope creep. And it expands and the business owner absorbs the extra work without a word. Hey, sure, I'll do it. They're not doing that because they care about relationships, even though they tell themselves that's why they're doing it. Underneath it, they're doing it because letting that energy flow of defending themselves says this is not okay because it's dangerous. This is too much. This is too aggressive. And this is not who I am. I'm not that person. I'm caring about relationships. So pushing that warrior archetype down isn't protecting the relationship. It's protecting a story that says, if I take up this much space, something bad is going to happen. If I push back, they're going to leave. If I charge too much, no one's going to pay me. If I say what I actually think, I'll be too much. So their warrior goes quiet. And you know what fills the space instead? Resentment, exhaustion, burnout, the irritation of knowing that you've not shown up for yourself. And like I said, there's many different archetypes. For me, the warrior is not the biggest problem for me. It's actually the jester. But there's many different archetypes and they all have strengths and they all have shadows. But I'm talking about the warrior because that's the one I encountered the most. And what's supposed to happen is that as we develop and as we grow in life, we're learning how to be fully planted so that we can be our fullest selves. And if you just think about a plant that is in a plastic cup is not really going to be as big or is not going to be the best that it can be. But if you take that same plant and you put it in great soil and it's outside and it's getting sun and it has great roots, it could actually grow bigger and stronger. And it's the same thing for us, is that normally whenever we are being formed and when we're being planted, a lot of the things that we want to do, we're told not to do. And that is one way that we really find ourselves not being able to show up in the way that we should. So one thing that you can think about, if this is something that you find is a problem for you, is where in your life is the warrior in you waiting for permission that will never come? Where in your life is the warrior in you waiting for permission that will never come? If you're waiting for someone else to tell you what to do and they haven't told you and you're 40 years old, this is a great question for you. If you're waiting for someone to mentor you and you've never found a mentor, it might be a great idea to go reflect on this. If you're waiting on your spouse to do something or your partner or whoever, a friend, if you're waiting on them to give you permission or to ask you to do something and they're not doing it and you've never told them, this is probably a good time. So that's the first question. The second question is, and what would it cost, or what does it cost for you to keep waiting? What does it cost for you to keep waiting? One thing I heard recently, and once again, a lot of this is in conversation with my wife because she does a lot with women's health. There's this idea, not only is it in story, but it's really cool to see health professionals as they focus more on women, is they're finding that, of course, when you're younger, you start having all these hormones running through your body, and it does make it more difficult to actually say what you want. But then as you start going through, I believe it's perimenopause and menopause, what happens is that you're not afraid to say what you want because those hormones aren't running as much as they are, so that you're more willing to stand up for what's important for you. But man, that's much later in life. And there's all this life before that really hasn't been lived in a way that you would love to live it. And this happens too in story. One of the biggest ways in stories is that the transformation of a man is going from independence to interdependence with other people, not being just such a rugged individual, but actually learning how to be there for others and also take care of others. And a lot of guys aren't really ready to do that until way later in their life. And by that time, their wife is fed up with it and she's like, I'm doing my own thing. And as you can guess, It's the opposite for a lot of women in that their journey is from interdependence to independence. And we see this happening, and a lot of this is important for us to really reflect on. So if you're waiting for permission for something and it hasn't come, this is the time. This is a call for you to actually start thinking about that. All right, so let's get to the last point here. What actually happens when you start suppressing this libido that wants to come through your life and be directed into this world through your ideas, through your hard work? Whenever all that energy wants to flow into this world and it doesn't have an exit, it does not disappear. It just finds a new door. And that new door looks like passive aggression. Sometimes it's burnout. Sometimes it's a low irritation that you can't really name. And I find that for myself sometimes. There's things that I should be doing and I'm irritated, and my kids know. They're like, oh, dad's asking us to clean. Dad's asking us to do this. He's asking us to do this. There's something's going on. And that's usually my wake up call. Wait, what am I ignoring? What am I pushing down that I haven't recognized? Another way that I see it happens that when people aren't letting energy come through them and they're suppressing it and they're repressing it and pushing it down or just not trying to be aware of it is the overworking, the overeating, and the doom scrolling. You're trying to get some work done, or you're like, oh, let me go do this one thing online. And the next thing you do, you're on Instagram doom scrolling. And then 20 minutes later, you're like, what did I even do? What was the point of that? The thing is that you can't stop it. Energy will come through you. If you're not using it, you're not directing it, you're not letting it go in the direction of the ideas and things that you're supposed to create, it will show up in those ways. It doesn't just disappear. It finds a new way to operate within you. So here's one reframe we can do. I've talked about problems as pointers. Whenever you find yourself trying to do something new, trying to do something that's important for you, and problems start arising because it's providing that friction, read that friction differently. Let it become information, not a verdict of something can't happen or won't happen, but let it become part of a puzzle that you're putting together. It's just more information. And when you notice that the energy still keeps coming up, and not only is it energy, but it's desire for something, and you see it keeps happening, pay attention to it. Because normally it will outlast the friction. It will outlast the struggle. It will outlast the problems if you are realizing that it's just giving you information of where you can improve. One thing that is the clearest business thing of all, or even professional working thing of all, is your failures, your struggles, your problems are usually related to a personal development area where you need to improve. And if you keep noticing it, use it. Let it help you become tougher, more resilient. And the more that you do that, the easier it becomes and the clearer the view is. So let's bring this to a close. Libido is not a dirty word, even though Freud made it one. And most people still talk about it that way. Libido is just having energy for the things that are important to you and helping you recognize that. It's also the name for the desires that are moving through you, through me, through all of us towards something. There's different archetypes that can help you understand how this energy is moving through your life. Maybe it's moving through as a warrior. Maybe it's moving through as a revolutionary. There's many different ways that this energy comes into our life, and using archetypes is a great way to understand how it's happening. Try to name the archetypes. Do I often show up as the caregiver? Do I often show up as the idealist? Do I often show up as the lover? And if I show up as those ways most of the time, I'm not going to have flexibility to live in other ways. And this is a reason why it's important to have flexibility. Whenever we're really developing into who we are, we have the flexibility to live all 12 of those archetypes that Carol Pearson talks about. Not just one, not just our dominant 3, but all of them, so that we can live a life and be energized to get things done that we need to. The last point I want to say is that when you suppress the energy, it doesn't disappear. It costs you. And the way it costs you could be resentment, exhaustion. We talked about irritation. But really what it's doing is it's eroding your sense of self. It's making you not view yourself in a full view, but a more fractioned view. So before the week is out, identify one place where you've been shutting off the valve of your libido. What one conversation you haven't had that you need to have? What's the one thing that you need to say? What's the one boundary that hasn't been set that you know you need to set? You don't have to blow anything up. You don't have to get on Facebook and tell the world you're unfriend you if they don't if they don't agree with you. But I want you to at least get honest with yourself about where that desire is and where you've been shutting it down. I found most people aren't lacking in skill, or they're not lacking in knowledge. They're actually lacking in permission. Permission to want what they want, to say what they think. It's not something you develop. It's something you stop suppressing. Well, that's the episode. I do want to ask that you check out the show notes. I have a free guide called Reframe. It's one of the best things I use to make sure that during the day, multiple times during the day, that I'm not doing low value work to stay busy, but that I take a step and widen the lens and make sure I'm doing my best work for myself and for those in this world. If you like this episode, please share it with a friend and leave me a 5-star review. If you could, I'd appreciate that mucho. Until next time, take care.